Um, Hello. How's everybody doing? Hopefully you're good. Hopefully everybody's been good, applying themselves and doing whatever they're supposed to be doing. Obviously, I'm just gonna briefly talk about the Roe versus Wade, the abortion thing or whatever. And the main issue itself wasn't even abortion; it was the fact that individuals were having sex before marriage. So hopefully now you're actually able to tackle that real issue that was, the main cause for it all, as well as the overall hearts of men being just evil. This is why individuals just rape, incest occurs, and other types of things like that, right? And pedophilia, where the uncle or the dad is old enough to get his own relative pregnant or another individual pregnant, another nasty wicked vile things like that. Well, for the most part, I know I already understand that individuals want to tug on other people's heartstrings, to try to get them to, be coerced to change their mind and to actually choose a side of pro-choice, when in reality, all of it has to do with being centered on God's control and sovereignty. And, obviously you could use those types of testimonies to be able to save more individuals. But people are selfish, right? They don't think and see with the bigger picture and see what it actually is, and so they just get very selfish, and they get very egotistical, right? And they think that they know it all, or that their ways are better than God's ways, and other types of things like that. But in reality, obviously, that isn't the case whatsoever. Whatever God has already planned and whatever He's in control of automatically is good. And because God is in control of all these things, this is in every single one of those issues, and scenarios and circumstances that come inside of your life should be viewed as so automatically good. And if you don't actually choose to view those sort of scenarios and circumstances as good, it is a sin. So it realistically really is that simple for you to be able to grasp and understand it, and as well as to be able to define what sins actually are. You are in no position whatsoever to decide that your ways are higher than God's ways, and that you somehow know better than God, or that your ways are good and compared to God's ways. That is a flat out sin. That's like you telling God that you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing, and that's the end of it. As well as overall, the real point of this whole video was just to actually talk about hell, and mostly just say some things that I just forgot about, and I haven't realistically have retained this out of my mind. While yes, I don't actually practice the sins that will cause me to go into hell, and I already have acknowledged the fact that the temptations are prevalent and really relevant inside of everyone's life. And if you don't fall into the temptations, it doesn't, you haven't fallen into sin. It still doesn't denote or demean the fact of God's holiness and how good God actually is. There's just so many testimonies I already have, watched online, that will automatically just, it would just terrify me, and it would just shock me to my core. And I would just be like so surprised and so like, man, it's like I know God is just good, and I know how He is, and I know He's like this type of individual that is just like that, and it would terrify me. I already know that sowing discord is one of the highest sins that you could possibly do. But it isn't even just that. It's just the fact that how you actually carry yourself, and your lack of of disciplining others that are around you, that really makes these things a lot more minuscule than you actually think. And realistically, people are just looking at these things for fornication and sins as not eating pork and other types of things like that, when in reality you're accountable for every one of your actions and how other individuals actually are going to receive them. If you do a certain, you stir the pot, right? That's saying that we actually have, and you do other things like that, automatically you're liable for the lake of fire. And many individuals don't see it like that. They just think that it's funny, I'm just gonna do this, I'm gonna instigate trouble and drama, but they're completely forgetting about God's character and His person, and considering how good He actually is, and taking that into consideration. That's what I was trying to say. When they actually are committing these abominations, which God obviously views, which all these individuals are automatically going straight into the lake of fire. I don't want you thinking that somehow these individuals are going to escape wrath, but it is because of God's holiness that they won't. And many Christians are already practicing and beginning to practice, these very destructive habits that would actually end up causing them to go into the lake of fire. For the most part, I don't practice any of those sowing discord things. If I notice an individual taking the wrong way or the wrong path, or they're handling situations in a destructive manner, or they're not coping with these sort of situations in a healthy manner, then obviously I'm very quick and swift to actually correct these individuals and tell them. Also, I want to be clear with individuals not to get the wrong impression of me that I'm some sort of murderer or killer or certain things like that. I obviously need these individuals to be 100% focused and centered on being able to recognize that there's just no alternative to any of Christ's teachings. Top of you automatically wishing the very best for the very worst of people on the face of this earth, and under no circumstance or jurisdiction are you ever allowed to deviate yourselves from that path. That's the overall basis for everything that I essentially do. That's the same type of, qualities and characteristics that need to be adapting for yourselves, or you're going to end up going into the lake of fire. At no point whatsoever are you called to murder another individual, a witch, to suffer them not to live. I already know how these things essentially are, but, for the most part, individuals are just heavily ignorant about what witches actually are, what they could essentially do. It's like, yes, they have a hierarchy, they have an order, they have other individuals on their team that are actually able to help them out to be able to, advance their goals and their agenda. But for the most part, these individuals are just completely powerless. They're empty vessels. You were empty before you ended up getting the Holy Ghost. This is just essentially what these individuals have. Their influences and their means of power is just demonic, activities and trying to convince you to let these sort of demons come inside of your life to tempt you, and then you end up falling into sin. Or, they try to do a little Trojan horse type of principles, and they try to, sneak something in, when in reality, it was something a lot bigger and something a lot more nefarious and what they were trying to claim to do. And that's just the overall point of it all. But because I already know that even if I don't tell you these sort of things, and I just do whatever I want, I'm liable for the lake of fire if I clearly see that you're not supposed to be doing those sort of things, and yet you're doing them, or you got the wrong impression of me, or maybe you thought that you were actually supposed to be acting like that or doing certain things like that, or maybe you even rejoice at the fact that certain individuals are burning in the lake of fire. You will end up going into the lake of fire for those ways of thinking, and that's just obviously is able to glorify and exalt God's person and his character, that he doesn't want you acting like little bastards and little, pieces of trash. You need to be automatically wishing the very best for the individuals that you don't want to wish the very best for. All these things have to deal with the heart transformation and a transformative part on your end. That way you are genuinely maturing and growing in Christ and growing in love, and that way you actually are able to bear more fruit that the Father is glorified. You're behaving yourselves exactly like angels, correct? So in the past video, I was just talking, so obviously this is, you could practice these sort of principles on the individuals that are pro-choice. I'm still wishing them the very best and hoping that they actually do get saved. But in the end, Christ is judge, right? Automatically, he's going to know the types of individuals that just want to get saved. That way they could actually plan the final rebellion, and that's it. And then they're going to end up going into the lake of fire, thinking that they could actually deceive God. And, whatever. You had a good heart about the situation, but these individuals just wanted to take an opportunity and take advantage of it, and this on them. But you are still called to automatically wish the very best for them and want these individuals to get saved. So obviously, it's pretty good on your end. You have pretty easy on your end. You have some homework and some practice to be able to practice that way of thinking out and pro-choice there. Those are your little targets, or your little punching bags for you to, do those sort of things, as well as overall, wickedness and, heinous acts of the politicians that are, in authority currently, to be wishing those types of individuals the very best, to be blessing them that curse you because they're cursing you through their policies and other things like that, and to be loving your enemies, and to still automatically have these good intentions for them and good hearts for these sort of individuals, regardless of what they actually have done or what they're going to do, because that is what God has called every Christian to do and to act like, to be forgiven, to overlook another individual's wrongs, and to just and keep loving. As well, spiritual warfare. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against, rulers, principalities, and, you fight against those sort of wicked beings that these individuals are obviously using to attempt to manipulate and rewrite the narrative, because it is a sin. There was this testimony that I saw not too long ago today about this demon, principality, I guess, who convinced so many Christians to actually end up fearing Satan, and because they actually ended up fearing Satan, and what could actually happen to them if they truly commit themselves to the Lord, and they truly, let go of everything like how Christ actually wants them to do. She was covered in their blood, and that was just basically her testimony, saying that of all the types of Christians that she eventually ended up slaughtering through temptation. And she was saying that if you end up, telling individuals about this sort of testimony, I'm going to kill you too, blah, 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 whatever. I don't really care, we're automatically, called, we're commissioned to do this, and we're commissioned to warn other Christians and unbelievers and believers to ensure that they aren't actually fearing the devil, because it is automatically a sin, and fearing the things that could actually happen to you for your faith and belief in Jesus Christ. These things are cowardice. Obviously all the cowards go into the lake of fire. So obviously this little stupid, demon, with the blood of Christians all, on her, is just a slap in the face to Jesus Christ. And you shouldn't take it. You shouldn't, think that you have to take it. You should definitely beat her for those sort of abominations that she's doing, because she definitely rejoices in her own heart, even though she won't do it, to Christ's face. She definitely has it in her heart. So, give her hell, and everyone else that's under her little authority and command. So yeah. So basically in the last video, I was just talking to, I was talking about this girl, right? Talking to this girl about how easy it was to actually be able to recognize and notice that there just is no alternative to any of Christ's commandments, and, the overall premise on how individuals just want to get to this Christ-like type of image and type of lifestyle, and not being able to, and all of it just being because of a mental issue, because of pride. Individuals just aren't actually able to let go of their pride or themselves, and they just can't, they basically believe that their actions are, appropriate and, and right as a Christian, even though it directly conflicts with, Christ's commandments that he's given to us. And so they don't realistically equate that they have to let go of how they actually think that they're actually wrong in their ways of thinking, how they process information and certain events that come inside of their lives. And due to that erroneous way of thinking and that error itself, they end up erring a lot more, and so they end up becoming degenerate and backsliding in Christ completely, because like I mentioned earlier in this video, because Christ is so good, these individuals automatically end up burning in the lake of fire, because of just a way of thinking and how they essentially are evaluating the sort of situations that come inside of their lives. When in reality, obviously, I was just telling her that it's just, they're trying to psych you out. They're trying to get in your head. They're trying to be like this and that everything is fine, and you're judging the situation correctly. It's all right to actually deviate yourself from Christ's commandments in this situation, just because this is the modern times and Christ, didn't directly address this sort of situation either way, or other little, slick types of things like that, to be able to convince individuals to sin and to fall into sin. So I'm just like throwing out, little tactics that they in short use against you. That way you're actually able to really, think ahead, and to really be like, wow, I could realistically really be deceived through little, means like this. So I really got to stay on my toes for these sort of things. But don't be afraid of it. Obviously I still want, like I told her also, I was like, I know, because once you actually do focus on the sins part of things, it begins to become an enormous issue in itself. So I just want you to be focused on wisdom, wise sayings, and just proverbs in themselves, because this is just going to be cleaning you up on the inside. You're going to be noticing also when you actually do read Proverbs, how, some of them you already have been practicing, which is very, good and praiseworthy. Those are areas of your life that you didn't suffer loss. And, that's essentially what is actually able to teach you in the areas that you are suffering loss, how you ensure we're just, processing those sort of situations inside of your life that cause you to think it was all right to act in, those sort of manners, only for it to just cause you to get rebuked by God, and for you to recognize and realize how serious these things actually were. Had you, had you died, you would have ended up going straight to hell. And that's just, the sad part about it. Somehow I make it look easy because of the things I essentially have done, how I practice these things out. But it is. I can assure you, these things actually are. You just have to get over that hump in the road. Sadly, when these things actually do end up coming inside of your life, you have to really address and confront the issue of spiritual reality and how these things actually do exist. The demonic exists. You're being tempted on a regular basis, but you have to be willing to fight against it. You can't be cowards. You already have been called to fight against, wicked principalities and rulers and other things like that. And this is just the main premise and the means for you to actually be able to guide you and direct you in your day-to-day lives. The top of you actually bearing fruits, that the Father is glorified. So maybe I'm already mentioning a lot more than what your pastor has already called you to do, which is obviously able to show you the error that your pastor is in. You need to be doing everything that I'm mentioning on top of everything that your pastor is mentioning as well. Obeying the law of Moses, wanting to be more obedient to God, and have good work ethic in this aspect of things. Obviously hopefully you're able to discern that Christianity does demand a lot from you at first, but it's only because you haven't, realistically made these things into a habit, and that's the only real reason why. But once you actually have gotten your little groove on, or whatever that saying is, and it just becomes integrated inside of your daily routines, it just begins to be whatever, and you just begin to polish up your virtues, and you begin to perfect your virtues that you already have, and still be bearing more fruit on top of that, while you actually are asking for Christ to prune you and doing those sort of types of principles as well, or you're never going to grow more than what you already have. And sadly, Christ essentially does this on purpose when you actually are stagnant, or you feel stagnant, or you're not realistically progressing as fast as you actually want to, and just to get that lazy habit out of your life, for you to realistically really take action for your salvation and discipleship with Christ. It's like, well, yes, Christ already has died for us. He has not called us to be lazy, right? He did give us a great commission for us to actually do on a regular basis, and to teach others to do as well, to cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils, to heal the sick, and to obey everything he already has commanded us to do. And that's just the standard, right? But then there's still the overall work that he already has called every single individual to do on the face of this earth, whether they're part of the secular life or whether they're not. And but just because you're not a Christian doesn't mean that Christ isn't actually able to get your work done. It just means that you're gonna have to suffer a lot more for your unwillingness to be saved, if you do get saved, on top of you actually automatically doing the work that you were just created to do. Some individuals are just created to actually act petty in your life, and then they automatically get dismissed and go into the lake of fire. This is very biblical. You need to go read Obadiah again for you to actually be able to discern how God's person actually is in character. What exactly is in that book? He mentioned the Chaldeans. What ended up happening? He used the Chaldeans to punish Israel in Jerusalem, and then what ends up happening to the Chaldeans? He disposes them. So he disposes of them, and he completely just throws them all into the lake of fire. So obviously, this is just what God essentially does. He uses the wicked as a sword to punish, the other wicked, the wicked Christians, to be able to refine, prune them, and to be able to really get them into shape, right? And to knock them into the sort of expectations and standards that Christ already has of them. Well, because of their unwillingness, their stagnancy, and they realistically don't put the pep to their step, and they're moving at their own pace. This is why the sort of things end up coming and happening inside of their lives. There is an urgency and a rush as a Christian that you need to be able to discern immediately when you actually do get saved. And I know to an extent individuals have already felt that, and they were just like, man, I wish everybody could get saved, and I feel like I have this great commission to save everyone. I know I've been there also. I had this sort of zeal, and I was so excited and so naive to think that everybody would actually be willing to accept what I actually am saying, and that they will get saved. But I was just a naive little 19-year-old, and I realistically didn't know what I was talking about. and thinking that every individual has their own beliefs and their own foundations that cause them to either reject or accept the gospel, and that's essentially it, and everything else that Christ and Shore had already stated in the gospels, how he said, let the blind lead the blind, will eventually end up manifesting inside of your life, and you are going to realize that you just can't save everyone. And even in the Christian, churches and communities, you just can't even save those types of individuals either. Very few individuals that actually are Christians will not even bother getting saved, and that's probably one of the saddest things about it. Also, they tasted a little bit of the gospel, but they didn't realistically have, a real heart and a real zeal for the Lord, and they made so many more excuses. They would much rather believe pastors instead of Christ himself and the very words of Christ. And and that's it. They made their choice, ended up choosing these pastors and over the shepherd, Jesus Christ. And there's not realistically anything that you could do about it, because these individuals are just Judases in disguise. And that's essentially it. And everybody wants to believe, and have these sort of good intents for everyone on the face of this earth. You want to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I already been there. But sadly, enough of those situations that will come inside of your life for you to actually be able to be taught that the individuals that really want to be saved will not even bother giving any sort of excuses to the enemy and to the devil. And the people who just want to barely do enough are just a majority of Christians. And the individuals that obviously do want to go above and beyond, what Christ himself has already commanded us to do, and obviously to do better than what Christ was already doing while he was walking here on earth, will automatically gravitate towards those things, because they're actually born of spirit and fire. So, yeah, grace and peace be multiplied to you. The grace is to know what I'm saying, the peace to know that it's sent from God, and the mercies to be able to receive these graces, and the grace and the love of the Lord Jesus Christ reign in your hearts, and be with you all. So, yeah, I mentioned a lot, basically this is just something I need to get out of the way. And, these are sentences, but for the most part, there is a depth to these sentences that you automatically have already understood in some way, shape, or form in your life. And that's just, the overall means for me to actually be able to teach you about how to be able to learn from Christ's lessons that he automatically puts inside of everyone's life. Obviously these sort of situations come inside of your life for a specific purpose, to mature you and for you to actually grow comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable with these sort of things, and essentially just be able to be focused and centered on Christ, being at the center of all of in control of all these sort of things. And that's perfectly fine. You realistically really do recognize your place as a Christian. But okay, so yeah, the Father is just telling me to obviously focus on talking about how good God actually is. And certain cases and scenarios of individuals that did end up going into the lake of fire, I already know these sort of words, they don't do it justice to actually you actually receiving grace and mercy from God. And and once you actually do receive, unless God really does have grace and mercy over your life, these things will continue going over your head, and you'll never be able to hear these sort of things. But there was just this individual who automatically, it's just really sad. These sort of situations that are coming inside of individuals, everybody's going through it, and everybody has gone through it, where they actually end up, backsliding and doing other things like that. And unfortunately, people just, end up never coming back from that. And so basically, these little testimonies that Christ actually ends up, sending and giving to us, that we are actually able to learn about his person and his overall holiness and what he actually is. It really is able to teach you and is able to, help you grasp, what the overall lesson is to be learned while you're walking here on earth. And it's just, how scary Christ actually is and how holy he actually is as well. When I was living in that reckless, lifestyle, where I automatically knew that I was headed into a lake of fire, but I was still using the struggle word as a crutch until finally, Christ essentially said, if you don't knock it off, I'll kill you for real. And then I was like, okay, I'll just stop. This got a little too real for me. I don't want to, say that I'm struggling, when in reality I could just knock it off. And that's essentially what ended up happening. And then when I ended up going to heaven, right, And then I felt, the terror of hell itself and how it was just a part of the environment. It wasn't that I was necessarily scared, because I really wasn't scared of hell, but I could automatically feel the terror and the fear of hell itself. And that in itself it's not even scary. It's just like a part of the overall environment. And this is probably one of the craziest things about it. And it was just very, horrifying. It's like hell itself is automatically just meant to be scary and meant to scare individuals because of the consequences that you're going to have to suffer for your actions. And so yeah, so yeah, obviously other testimonies of people that actually end up going into hell. The Korean painter who actually ended up painting hell and what she saw there, about individuals who ended up lying, and what ends up happening to these sort of people. These sort of devils just end up stuffing, shovels full of rocks inside of their mouths, and obviously they're just stretching their mouths, as far wide as possible and even wider than that, but to be able to do these sort of things miraculously. And it's just really horrible what these sort of punishments actually are. It realistically is able to show you that God really isn't mocked, and for any one of these sort of sins or the types of lifestyles that individuals like living, you're gonna have to pay for it. And obviously by lifestyles, I'm implying mentalities and how you carry yourselves, because that is a sin. If you're not carrying yourselves appropriately, you're not walking in humbleness and meekness and contriteness and penitence and other types of little virtuous characteristics like that, being neighborly, because people truly do walk around, with a petty way of thinking, and how that's how they carry themselves. They just live to be petty. They live to gossip about other individuals, and they're just rude and shallow people. And these are just facts of life that we already have been accustomed to knowing and recognizing these sort of things. But so yeah, and then other individuals for sowing discord, and this is just something that realistically I'm very familiar with, just because of the fact of I already know God's person, what he actually is. He was basically just really teaching me that lesson back in like 2017 about why I shouldn't be doing that, and why I should be striving to I have peace with all men, because of the ramifications of my actions and what is actually going to happen if I don't want to really pursue that sort of lifestyle, to want to have peace with all men, and to ensure that individuals don't get the wrong idea of certain types of sermons or certain types of actions, or things of mine that I ensure to actually do. And so yeah, I'm trying to get that out. So basically, it was just he was just trying to get me to understand that your actions is just the same exact way as like a domino effect. It affects you, and it affects another individual, and another individual. It affects another individual from there, and it just keeps spreading on and on and on and on. It's like a sickness, in short. And that's just something that Christ is actually trying to get me to understand, that your one action automatically just destroys so many more souls, because of the the amount of discord that you actually have sowed through that one little minute action that you actually have. This is why it's serious when individuals on Instagram are posting pictures of themselves with the squats and other types of gym pictures like that, and even Christian girls who actually end up posting cleavage or tight dresses or other types of things like that. I already have come to just common knowledge. I already understand that they're already operating under the same exact, because everybody's operating under the domino effect, and that one little domino automatically goes to so many other different types of dominoes, and it's on your own responsibility to clear your name, and to ensure that other individuals are not getting the wrong idea of you and thinking that you're some reckless type of individual, and other types of things like that. Christ automatically hates it when you just let another individual think whatever they want to think about you, without you actually telling them and explaining the situations for what they actually are in his eyes, and to Christ's, because of his character and person. So obviously you need to keep that in mind, that how good he actually is. He thinks it's an abomination for you to just let other individuals receive messages in a wrong manner, even if you had the best intentions of them all. And that's just something that needs to be understood in the Christian community that actually want to be teachers and actually want to make these sort of posts. And honestly, and this is why I already know that every individual that is preaching these sort of messages is not just qualified to do these sort of things, because there's so much more of a burden that comes from you. And I know it sounds like a cliche or whatever, to actually do these sort of actions and do these things themselves, but I can't even show certain types of body parts of my own, because if I cause another woman to actually end up stumbling over something that she just in short just actually likes, then it is as if I committed a sin. I'm the one who caused her to stumble, and it wasn't even realistically my fault because I look like this or because I do this or certain things like that. It has to deal with my own responsibility of ensuring that individuals are protected and safe from those temptations and other things like that. Even if I'm married, and even if this and even if that, well, other individuals knowing that you're married is pretty easy for you to be able to automatically dismiss. I say, oh well, whatever, he's not going to be interested in me either way. That's typically how individuals think. You're still it's really a lot, and you really have to you do have to pray to Christ to ensure that the eyes of other individuals that are going to see you are protected from from lust and from vanity and from conceit and from other types of things like that, to ensure that these individuals don't actually fall into sin. And automatically you're just like, wow, that actually really is good. If you do that without anyone telling you, you really care about people and you really care about their souls, other things like that. So that really does reflect Christ's person and who he actually is, that if you don't do those certain things and you don't do those things themselves, you're going to end up going straight into the lake of fire. And because it's a sin, and there seems to be a very um it's very convenient, right, for individuals to define sins, because then that means they never actually have to change or take responsibility for any of their actions. But sadly, these things is just that simple and that easy. It's just you don't do it. You don't define sins for yourself. And if you realistically really do want to mature and grow, and you really are teachable and other types of things like that, then obviously you're going to continue progressing and advancing. And Christ is how he's in short just shaping you and molding you to become more Christ-like and more like an angel, for you to actually be able to discern and automatically dismiss the sort of thoughts that would cause you to be liable to the lake of fire. And that's just basically it. It's realistically that simple. For these types of individuals and the Instagrammers, the queens of Instagram that actually end up just taking pictures of their provocative pictures and selfies and other types of things like that, and cleavage, if these individuals do repent, obviously they could get saved. It's going to take a lot. They're going to have to automatically delete all of their Instagram and whatever. But if at any point you as a Christian discourage another Christian from doing good works, you're going to go straight to the lake of fire. And these things are realistically that simple. If I at any point discourage another individual from wanting to be saved, from being saved and doing other types of things like that, then I'm liable for the lake of fire. Hopefully you're able to discern that, right? You are not called at all to discourage a single individual from actually doing a good work and from doing good things, because of God's character and his person. And based off of that alone, that should tell you everything, right? That should tell you everything of what you can and can't do, and what you shouldn't do and what you should never do, and other types of things like that. And people just typically get confused, right? Because they equate God's judgment and his place as judge according to his own character and person, when in reality those are two different things. It's not even the fact that God's person doesn't conflict with his judgments or other types of things like that. God's person never conflicts with his judgments. That's something that you need to be able to understand as well. Because of God's character and because of God's person, those are the judgments that you actually end up receiving, that you actually end up taking it a wrong way, or you somehow feel like it sucks for you to, or that God's the mean one, or the bad one is your ignorance on, God's actual person. You should automatically be able to gravitate yourselves towards God's good intents for every single one of these sort of situations that do come inside of your life, because he's put in them for the specific purpose to be able to benefit you because of his infinite wisdom, and he's able to use everything to benefit you and everyone else around you as well. It's realistically that simple. But individuals get selfish. I already know individuals forget, individuals don't retain this sort of knowledge, and they don't do those sort of things for them to actually be able, or they don't actually take real action to ensure that they actually do retain this sort of information. They're just like, oh, well, whatever, it sounds good. It's like, yeah, you're right. I already have recognized this in so much shape before in my life, but then another test ends up coming inside of their life, and what do they end up doing? They end up bombing and failing it completely. And then it's just like, what did I just tell you to do? I told you to obviously be prepared and to do those sort of things for yourself and for your life. And I mentioned that always in my video, how if you would just have recognized that when individuals come inside of your life to be petty and to cut you in line or to rob you or to do certain things like that, that Christ is using it specifically to benefit your eternal character and just to be able to benefit you, but you automatically get angry or impatient, which are sins when these sort of situations actually do come. And your lack of being able to retain that this sort of information to be able to apply to your life is a sin as well. And that's the real problem, and that's the real issue. It doesn't have to do with God's a good character and God's a good person. That's why these sort of things end up coming inside of your life. Everybody just has this whole they realistically do not know God's real person, not how he actually is. And because of that, it causes so many more problems that are completely avoidable and just totally unnecessary. Had you actually have known how good God actually was and how good he actually is, and that's why he's sending these sort of tests inside of your life that are realistically making you extremely uncomfortable, then you would actually end up passing and benefiting from these things. But because of your paranoia and because of your delusionalness and how you actually don't think how you actually think you know God, but in reality you don't. This is why you have so many more problems and issues inside of your life. And these things themselves are just pretty basic and pretty simple for you to be able to understand, right? It's all your fault. And nobody's to blame but yourself. I mean, you already have retained, you already have known, you already have common knowledge that God is love and other things like that. And yet these tests come inside of your, these tests come inside of your life that cause you to question God himself. And who are you to question God, right? You're absolutely no one, nothing. There's been like 10 billion people that have existed in, the history of mankind. And who are you to say that you're better than any of them? Not even Christ did that. And here you are. So obviously it definitely is a lot of pride on your end. That seems to be the main issue for most of these sort of problems and issues in themselves, which I was speaking to that girl. I was just simple, but you have to have a good heart towards these sort of situations, these scenarios. You can't let other individuals influence your good intentions and your good works that you essentially want to do for another person. Regardless of what a person is going to say. Obviously you have to pray for the other individual because it's automatically good, and it's a sin if you don't. But yeah, these it's just relatively that simple. You just have to be, just like how Paul addressed specifically, you need to be simple with evil and wise with good, and for you to actually be able to really apply those sort of things to your life, and to just be applying common sense to it, just like I was mentioning earlier or not earlier, in the last video, how the heart is deceitful above all things, but what did Christ automatically tell us? To store for yourselves treasures in heaven and in your hearts, because out of the heart of man automatically, this is what comes out of these sort of things, because these individuals automatically think that it's alright to murder, to slander, to sow discord, to do other things like that, and to not automatically be striving for peace with all men, regardless of individuals saying, oh man, you're acting like a goody two shoes, and other things like that. You already know how people are, right? You already know how individuals are just going to come inside of your life to try to be like, to try to instigate, to try to stop you from doing those sort of things. Like, yeah, man, you need to relax, you need to chill out, and you need to do other things like that because of whatever the case may be. But you are not called to answer to any of them at any point whatsoever. You answer to Christ, and it's that simple, and So yeah, basically what Christ, he was just telling me this. He was just reminding me of it, and I was just like, man, this is scary, and completely forgot about this, And basically it's like, well, I'm just gonna humble myself down. I don't struggle with any sins whatsoever, and that's probably one of the craziest things about it. There's so many Christians that struggle with, so many types of suffrages and ailments inside of their life that they're not actually able to let go. And I don't struggle with any of these things. Christ does know it, and that's perfectly fine, and it is what it is. But I basically was just recognizing it and realizing that I just need to keep a clear mind, because of I already have understood what is the real cause and for these sort of situations, and why you end up falling into sin and temptations is because of your mind. All and every single one of your thoughts is a potential for you to actually fall into sin. And it realistically is that simple. If you don't discipline yourselves, and if you aren't strict with your mind, your heart, your soul, your will, and your emotions, and that's realistically that simple. And because of that, because I already have common knowledge towards that, I already have recognized that it's just best to have a clear mind and to not think about anything. Uh, and that was essentially it. Obviously, common sense, just apply logic to it. It's not that complicated. I know anything about anything. Yes, obviously, anything about anything except what God already has commanded us to do. That's just the overall foundation of it all, that I essentially, function, and how I react to these sort of situations that come inside of my life. That way I automatically know not to do anything else, because I don't know anything else realistically. All I know is that I need to automatically obey Christ's commandments, and anything else that obviously God has automatically called me to do. That is just my own mission, and that is my own, that's just what I actually have to do, because I'm a human being. I'm subservient to the Lord. I'm not above God. I'm not above his ways, or whatever the case may be. And because of those sort of principles in themselves, it should be realistically that simple for me to really equate and really integrate inside of my daily lives, and integrate it inside of my, my routines, whatever I actually have to do. That's perfectly fine. I don't have to prove anything to anyone, and that's perfect. I don't realistically care about any of those sort of things. Obviously, the only main issue in it that I realistically have noticed in myself is that there's always a more excellent way than how I actually am reacting to these sort of situations, even if they are Christ's commandments. And this is very commendable in Christ's eyes, that he obviously praises this sort of, ways of thinking and mentalities while you actually are a Christian, is that you already have recognized that there's an overall growth, and a maturity, right? That you're not always going to be stuck in the same old, types of fruits and virtues that you essentially have learned. And when you were 20 years old, there has to be some sort of maturity and growth on your end, of you actually bearing more fruit, that the Father is glorified, and obviously Christ is able to bless you, and he's able to bless others through you, because of your willingness and your teachableness towards these things, and being able to discern the fact that you just don't know it all. And these things are realistically really that simple. It just seems just mind-blowing, because you haven't heard it like that, or you don't apply it to your life like that, or whatever. And or rather, because you haven't practiced it in your life. But once you really do begin practicing these sort of practices, these things just begin to be just normal to you. It's just like, well, whatever, I realistically don't care. All I'm focused on is just growing more and more and more, on top of the knowledge that I already have to actually be a better human being. I already have common knowledge that how I function and how I react to certain situations is not the best forever and ever. There's automatically going to be a better situation. And even Christ, because his ways are higher than our ways, that should automatically teach you that there is some sort of it's more excellent way than how you actually are handling the situation in that current instance and in that time. The same situation that comes inside of your life, you're going to handle it in so many different ways, in so many different forms, before you end up dying and going to heaven. And all these things themselves could be different and could be better than the last time and the next time if you would just adopt those sort of mentalities for your life. But you're not going to be able to do it without deliverance. I know it sounds crazy, but realistically you really do need to deliver yourselves. It makes it easier. You got to work smarter, not harder. So I'm going to break all these curses up, as well as your willingness to want to let go of certain things that will recurse you, as well as doing certain things like that. And I'm casting these things out of your mind. That way you actually are able to recognize that you need to have a clear mind about every single one of these things. And automatically it should begin teaching you when you actually are able to just dismiss any and all thoughts, and anything that you actually have retained from the Lord is just the first thing that just begins to be popping up inside of your mind, for you to actually be able to practice and start working it out into a little habit for your life, and then it just branches off. And that's essentially how it just started, so hopefully you're actually able to discern. I'm not just rambling, but that's how I started. And the more you actually put it to practice, the better and the sooner you're going to see these results, and to the point that it's actually going to be able to teach you that every single situation that you actually are judging is automatically just righteous, and you have no real need or a necessity for you to actually deviate yourself from any of Christ's commandments, because of the amount of knowledge that you already have received from these sort of situations of you actually practicing these things out. That this is the most excellent way and the best means for you to actually cope with these sort of situations in your life, and that's the healthiest means. I don't know what type of situations that you could actually be taught that this is the best means for you to be able to do it. I think it's just being neighborly, or being nice and neighborly to your actual neighbors. That's the easiest means to be able to teach you how these things in themselves are automatically good and praiseworthy, and the habits in themselves just teach you for you to actually be able to learn and discern, that you need to automatically be dedicated and committed to that way of thinking, and that mentality, because it's going to work for you. But then again, obviously, what have I been mentioning? There's always a more excellent way than these things. So yeah, I'm casting these things out by the Legion, and I'm casting them out of your heart, because that's what's going to end up causing you to actually fall into the sins, because automatically in your heart you think it's perfectly fine and alright. You may have heard it in your mind that somehow it's okay for you to actually act in these sort of manners, in these sort of ways. But because you actually ended up falling into the sin, it became a heart issue. And that's essentially how Christ actually sees it when you break the law, and when you actually break his holy laws and his ordinances. It doesn't have to deal with the fact that you were actually tempted and fell into sin. He was tempted as well, but he completely dismissed them all and he shrugged it off. It has to do with your own, heart issues. Because you were tempted, you thought it was all right. And because you thought it was all right, it was an iniquity of the heart. And that was the main, problem of it all. And had you not fallen into the sins, obviously you would have, more or less, you don't have that iniquity inside of your heart that would cause you to fall into those sort of sins. But because of it, because you actually did have that iniquity in your heart, which I'm casting out of your vessels, that was the main issue for these sort of problems inside of your life that you weren't realistically able to discern or equate. It's like so frequently we always hear, it's some of the most stupidest things that I've ever heard in my entire life, how Christians don't even bother confronting or addressing the spiritual side of things. And all of them are too afraid to actually admit that demons exist, and they're actually being tempted to fall into sin. And instead of that, automatically every single one of them just take responsibility and they take accountability for the temptations that they actually are being tempted with, instead of being able to confront and point the finger at, like, demon, you better stop tempting me, and doing other types of things like that. But to them, it just doesn't realistically make any sense whatsoever. To them, they have to automatically take responsibility for it because they're a wretch. When in reality, what did Christ end up doing? He said, it is written, and that was essentially it. And that's what these individuals at least do that, right? You don't want to confront the demonic, at least do that. It's written, and and do certain things like that. But nah, I mean, to these individuals, they don't notice it. They're way too carnal, and that just is the main, and that's the exact reason why they're extremely carnal, and that's just the main reason for it all. Sadly, they're that carnal, and I'm gonna keep saying it. It's carnal, and these individuals are 100% just totally carnal, and and it's just so sad about the fact that these individuals they claim to be Christians, but they act like they think like how a secular individual thinks. They may have a little bit of knowledge on grace and mercy and other types of things like that because, they read a couple of scriptures or two. But for the most part, they automatically still live in the same sort of mindset as these secular individuals, like the demonic doesn't actually exist. And therefore, every single emotion, every single thought that comes inside of their mind has to be theirs. It's ridiculous. I'm not saying this to condemn these sort of individuals or to automatically belittle them, but it just means from the outside looking in, it's just 100% ridiculous. You could have been 100% set freed from your struggles and from your ailments if you had just confronted these issues. But even now, some individuals will not even bother actually confessing that sin in itself of not wanting to address the spiritual side and the demonic temptations. And I know it sounds like a paradox that it's a sin for you to actually take responsibility for a temptation that you didn't actually fall into, but that's essentially what it is. It's a sin. And so it's like they just stack these sins one on top of another. How it's the sin of them actually not being able to equate, the demonic and actually them falling for lust or whatever temptation that they actually ended up being tempted with or by. So yeah, I'm casting these devils out by the legion because they're just there to actually make your lives a lot harder and a lot more difficult. And I'm casting these thoughts out of your mind, your heart, your soul, your will, and your emotions because they're inside of your vessel just like that. They're just there as disguised as thoughts when in reality they're actually demonic entities whispering these sort of things in your mind and in your ears telepathically or verbally. And that's how they actually are doing it. So I'm casting these thoughts out of your mind, your heart, your soul, your will, and your emotions, especially your emotions, just because you individuals are so naive and gullible to how evil these devils are and how they, in short, operate and how they maneuver and manipulate this earth to get what they actually want. In the same exact manner as how alcoholics manipulate individuals to actually get more money, to actually be able to drink more. This is the same exact premise and principle. These individuals are doing the same exact thing to you, and you don't even recognize it or equate it. You're just like, well, whatever, I'm called to be a Christian, saved by grace through faith, and that's essentially it. When in reality, you need to free the captives, you need to free individuals, that these individuals are actually, taken advantage of because they never wanted to actually admit this or confront this issue as well. It's very convenient to throw grace around like nothing because automatically it defines who you actually are and that you actually are a Christian. But are you realistically really doing what Christ has automatically commanded you to do, or even doing anything that Christ himself has created you to do, rather, right? That seems to be something that should be a staple for individuals who actually claim to be a Christian, but that isn't even the standard whatsoever. And it's pretty sad. Really, it really is sad that individuals just think like that, and they think that they're actually doing the right thing for Christ because it's automatically good and praiseworthy and you see other individuals doing it. But it's that on top of other things as well that Christ himself actually wants them to do, on top of the work that they actually were created to do. So it's a lot of work. I know. It's like, dang, this is crazy, but it's actually good. It glorifies God's person, and obviously it shows how good he actually is. He's not a lazy individual. He doesn't want you being lazy. He doesn't actually want you doing any of those sort of things that will cause you to have other individuals get the wrong idea of Christians or to what is it? Is it misrepresent them? It sounds wrong. To not and for individuals to get the wrong idea of Christ and to automatically misrepresent him, whatever. But yeah, yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest issues as well, is that every single one of these Christians are also liable for the lake of fire and will go to the lake of fire for just not being able to really represent Christ how they should and how they need to. It isn't enough that you actually tell them about hell and that God is love and other types of things like that. It's you voluntarily stepping up to the plate and telling individuals not to the real blunt truth and the solid truth, and not to be sugarcoating anything because it's just the same exact way as you not even telling them, and that's just the fact of the matter of it. He doesn't want Christians, sugarcoating any of it, and it's just realistically, it's just so sad that they think these Christians think that they're doing it correctly and doing it in a right manner, because they actually are telling them not to sin and to do other types of actions like that. But in reality, it's just as bad as them not actually telling them the truth, and or not even telling them at all about hell, or telling them at all about that Jesus Christ actually loves them. These are very good things to actually do, to actually tell people that Jesus loves you. But you can't at all be so self-satisfied with that, because you cannot at all be satisfied with that at all, and it's only going to make you more complacent, sadly, and you're going to think that you're actually pleasing Christ, when in reality you're frustrating him a lot, because you're not willing to bow down to his authority and to his person on what he actually wants you to do, on top of telling individuals that Jesus loves them, and doing other little things like that. You're not actually telling people the blunt and plain truth, and those sort of things in themselves. These are all means of you actually being able to avoid. I'm sorry, I'm like stuttering. These are means for you to automatically be able to step up to the plate and avoid it entirely. And that's essentially it, for you to be able to recognize and discern for yourself that you have every ability and capability to be able to avoid these sort of torments, because that's what you're actually going to go through. You will go into the lake of fire if you don't stop sugarcoating these things. You just want to act like God's a Care Bear, and he just wants to hug everyone, and certain things like that. God is infuriated in this current day and age, and that's just something that you need to be able to recognize, as well as these false pastors. Yeah, these false pastors are the same exact as the false prophets are the same exact as the false prophets in the day and age of Jeremiah or Ezekiel, or other types of individuals like that realistically are actually able to teach you that these things do not change, and mankind has always repeated the same old patterns and cycles without them actually learning anything. And the proof is in the times that we're actually in right now, how things actually haven't changed. And people would much rather prefer to hear God is love over God is infuriated, which is the real message, and the relevancy of what is relevant to our daily lives. And you really do need to step up to the plate and tell other individuals that God is infuriated, regardless of how they actually are going to receive those sort of messages. You can pray for them to receive them in a good manner, and not to be so stubborn about those sort of things, but obviously it isn't for sure, right? You still, obviously, what was the crystal clear warning that Christ gave us in Ezekiel, that if you don't warn an individual about where they're actually going to be headed to if they don't repent, they're going to, their blood is required from you, and you're going to end up going into the lake of fire with them. And it's really that simple. You're going to have to do the same exact things that these prophets were doing in the old days, and that way you're not actually responsible for anyone burning in the lake of fire because of your you didn't want to tell them the truth. And it's like, well, yeah, God will throw you in the lake of fire, but he still loves you. And I can't say certain things like that. I don't want to discourage this individual from from being saved. Man, these things, I know, I've been there also, and especially with my family members, because it's a whole other story with your family members. You've been living with them all of your life, and because of that, they realistically take everything you say with a grain of salt. They don't take anything that you say seriously. They're just like, oh, whatever, you're gonna be telling me this, and other types of things like that. And it's like, yes, I know how this sounds. It's because of me that you should actually be able to listen, and to open your ears to these sort of messages, instead of you just thinking that I'm just saying this because of some sort of enlightenment I actually have reached in my lifestyles or my lifetime. And realistically isn't like that whatsoever. And that's just something that you need to be able to discern and be able to equate as well, that you need to tell individuals the truth, and you need to be still praying for them before and after, these sort of messages actually end up coming out, because it's on you if you don't tell them these sort of things, because of how good God actually is and his characteristics and qualities, right? These are all, virtues that you need to be practicing for yourselves and for your lives, because of the very simple basis that is Christ-like. And you claim to be a Christian, right? So you need to be imitators of everything that is remotely Christ-like. Don't overcomplicate it. These things are realistically that simple. Just choose everything and anything that is good, because God is good, and other little things like that, and you should be fine. And just dismiss these things and any bad and wicked thoughts, and just cast those thoughts out, and do certain things like that, and just automatically just really be saturated in wisdom, and really be saturated in the word of God, because once you actually really do learn all of those things in themselves, you're able to retain that sort of information for your life. Automatically, you're just going to be practicing those sort of things that you already have learned. It's almost like when you actually begin working at a job, and everything you see just reminds you of your job. It's kind of like what it actually is. I mean, it's crazy. These things sort of work like that, but that's just how they actually are. And but that's just so it's actually not overcomplicating the sort of situations that will come inside of your life, because you automatically know how to react to those sort of situations, uh, since you've just been in the Word for all of your life and a majority of your life. So yeah, I'm still loosing these virtues and blessings and graces and all inside of your vessel. No financial blessings, but still the deliverance side is being loosed. And yeah, the video is about to end. Love you. Thank you. Apply yourselves. Bye.